Okay, Greg, thank you for joining me today. Really excited to sit down with you.
Thanks so much for having me, Erin.
Why don't we start with you just sharing a little bit about your background and how you got into the people space in the first place?
I, like many people, I think, got into this space by accident. So back in the late 90s, 99, I was moving out to San Francisco from DC. And a friend of mine was a recruiter, and he said, hey, you're going to San Francisco? You should be a recruiter. It's super hot out there. It was the tail end, but it was still the dot-com boom.
Yeah.
And so I came out. I just blindly took his advice, came out, found a recruiting gig in a contingent agency, and just really fell in love with it.
That's awesome. So what were kind of the factors that made you want to stay? Like, you're still in people.
It's kind of cliche, but it's the people, right? So I think it's what's really amazing is, once I cut my teeth for that year in contingent, and then I kind of went on site, and I really saw the impact that you're able to have in this role. 6 months into my first on-site recruiting gig, walking in the door and looking around and going, oh, wait a minute, I've hired half of these people, right? Like half of this team, this startup that's growing, this rocket ship, and that just feels really good.
Yeah.
And then you have a connection with those people too, because you were that entry point for them into the company, and so they feel this special bond with you. I think it's really cool.
Most recently, you were at Snapdocs, and I know you've been building out that team there, the whole people team and the team itself. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've been at Snapdocs for about 13 months. I'm head of talent there. And I was the first senior people hire really. So I've built out a small recruiting team. We've got 2 recruiters and a talent ops person now. And we're about 80 people. We were 42 when I came in. My team I just love my team. They are just kicking butt. We did 19 hires this quarter between the 2 of them. And that's across a whole bunch of really tough roles, engineering and sales and customer success. So I'm super proud. The machine's kind of humming, and it's just a lot of fun, right? It's a lot of fun to build, and because there's no people person, I get to kind of jump on a lot of that in conjunction with my boss, the VP of Ops. So just recently selected Lattice and put that in place. Did our first engagement survey. So getting my hands on some of that stuff, it's great, learning and growth for me. So super exciting.
Awesome, and I know you're involved obviously with PeopleTech Partners. How does your involvement with that community, both on the company and founder side and with the advisors and the people and HR leaders, how does that support the work that you're doing at Snapdocs?
It is incredibly supportive. It's invaluable. It's, PeopleTech is this amazing network, right? I think it's a lot of things. So I think it's this wonderful program for people tech companies to come through and get the advice and the support in those early days that they need, right? And connections sometimes. For us advisors, I think we get so much out of it, right? Like that network. We've got a Google group. Everybody's very active in that Google group. And at any time, if I'm struggling with something that I don't know about on the people side, I jump on there, I ask a question, I get 3 answers in 2 hours, right? And I know it's these super knowledgeable leaders in the space. I know I'm getting great advice, and it's just great.
With your roles at Snapdocs and your previous roles in recruiting and as an HR and people leader, what are some of the challenges you've seen that kind of leadership role is facing historically? And then I'd love to hear from you what kind of you think is coming.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I think we're at this really interesting crux right now. So I think historically, some of the challenges were getting attention, getting people to getting the exec level, to kind of buy in to what we were doing, right? Even just on the talent side, there's a lot of lip service that gets paid to, hey, talent is the most important thing, hiring is the most important thing, and I think historically, unfortunately, that was often lip service, right? And it was the rubber hit the road, right? It was talent was seen as a commodity, and so I think historically that's been one issue to kind of fight for that seat at the table, right? I think all of a sudden in the last kind of year to 3 years, this period has just kind of flipped that, and talent and people have become so much more important. That lip service has turned into reality. People are starting to walk the walk more, and so that's amazing. The other thing that's happening right at that same time is the function is really evolving just at this incredible pace, right? So it was very stagnant, I think, for a long time, and it's really just exploding right now, and there's so many new things to think about, and there's so much technology coming into this space, and I think that's the challenge for a senior leader in this space, is just shiny objects, right? Like, what do I do? How do I kind of cut the noise out? What do I really need to do? What tools are really going to help me? That's a big challenge,
I know within PeopleTech Partners, we've had these kind of focused areas around certain initiatives or certain trends that we've seen coming through in the space, recruiting and how AI technologies or just more more modern and futuristic technologies are going to impact that function has been one of the focuses or thought leadership discussions that we've been having pretty consistently over the last 6 months or more. Do you have any thoughts on that or perspectives that you're seeing?
Ever since I've been in recruiting 20 years, I've heard, hey, technology's coming, it's changing recruiting, it's changing recruiting. And that was, I think like a lot of industries, right, that was very slow. It seemed very glacial. We had, LinkedIn came along since I've been recruiting, right? And
that was a change.
Right, and that was a big change, right? But it was like, then it would be, years before something else interesting happened, right? And now all of a sudden there's so much technology hitting the space so quickly, and AI, like you mentioned, is, it's going to change everything, really, And so, yes, of course, it's already changing recruiting. You see it with, some of the really interesting startups out there that are doing, AI-driven chatbots that can basically do the phone screen essentially for you, right? And even video versions, right, with avatars. It's going to be pretty interesting.
Are there any other areas or trends that you've seen that are particularly have a particular passion or interest in, or anything with our companies that is really exciting for you?
Definitely. I think that some of the AI stuff is really interesting to me. I just love tech that, so that's some gee whiz. The AI is kind of gee whiz tech, and that may actually replace us as recruiters right, sometime soon. But I also love the technology that just helps you do your job better, the everyday kind of job, right? So like, a company that I advise through PeopleTech, Drafted, right? That's an internal referral platform. And so that really just takes all that teeth pulling out of that process that we've always had to do, going through everybody's LinkedIn with a fine-tooth comb, right? And so this is just something, it's just a nice piece of technology that makes somebody's job that much easier, right? And I love stuff like that. I think that's kind of what Snapdocs is, right? It's not flying robot cars, right? It's just real technology for a real world problem, right? Taking the fax machine out of the mortgage closing process and replacing it with some modern tools and technology, right? And so I love stuff like that. I think that's really useful, right?
So as kind of an advisor, you mentioned you're an advisor for Drafted, and I've had discussions this week at the conference with several other advisors just kind of commenting on the co-build mentality that it seems like the two sides of the house at PeopleTech Partners really are able to come together. As an advisor for Drafted and your involvement with the companies that go through our programming, kind of what are your experiences from that perspective of how that's impacting and how that's driving the technologies of the future? That
access to the market, right? So early on, these companies are, oftentimes they're working on a hypothesis, really, right? Like, hey, I've got this great idea. I think it's a great idea, right? And I've got great technology, and let me find out. But without that network to come, that program to go through, right, and get access to people in your space, the experts who are going to be using this, right? I think that would take so much longer for them to kind of get to the right place. I've seen, comments made on calls, and then, weeks later, a new version of an offering, right, based on those comments. And I was like, hey, I was on that call, right?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't make the comment, unfortunately, but somebody smarter than I did. So I think it's really cool, and it's great for us because we get to see this stuff early, right? And I've been an early user of several PeopleTech companies now. So Sapling all the way back when they started, and Drafted, and RecruitBot, and a couple of others.
So Greg, one of the things we've been hearing about with kind of the changing landscape for some of the roles within HR and people, specifically around recruiters, is the challenge of finding really great talent in that space who are prepared for what's next.
It's just been amazing to watch this shift, and it's now as hard to hire a good recruiter as it is to hire a software engineer, which is amazing. If you would have told me that 5 years ago, I would have said no way. Gosh, it took me 3 months to get my first recruiter at Snapdocs, and 6 months before I got my second on the team, and that was 6 months of continuous effort to find that right person, right? And so it's really tough. It's really tough to find those great people, and so I think it's just really important to make sure that you're giving them what they need, right? The development that they need and want, right? And that I'm a big believer in the kind of servant leadership model, right? So I'm making them better every day, right? And I kind of think of myself as a coach, and I kind of really love coaching recruiters, right? So, I hope that's that kind of approach and that mentality of making sure that they're better off when they eventually walk out the door, because of course they eventually will, right? Than when they joined. I hope that that's something that sets us apart a little bit and helps us retain those great recruiters a bit longer.
It's interesting, and this may be something that applies or not, but I feel like it's very well known, the talent war that's going on the engineering and software developer side. That's something that you see, especially in Silicon Valley, there's billboards up that are, trying to attract the next engineer, the next thing. And maybe this is just my, ignorance outside of that space, but I don't feel like the recruiting space gets that much press, and it sounds like they should be, right?
Yeah.
They're that go-between that's going to place those engineers, that's going to help fight that battle.
Yeah. There's still a little of that mentality of, well, anybody can be a recruiter, right? And so there's a lot of recruiters, right? Because people, it's a great market, it's a great time to be a recruiter, and so people just jump in, right? And so I think if you just want to hire a recruiter, it probably wouldn't be that hard.
Yeah.
You could probably hire somebody in a week. But if you want to hire somebody who knows what they're doing, right, or somebody who's really been around, a craftsman, right, a craftsperson who really knows the craft of recruiting and knows the ins and outs of doing that at a startup, it's going to take a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's really, I can tell by the way that you're talking that you understand this craft. I mean, you have the experience, you've shared that, but you understand this craft, and that it does require that interest and constant commitment to that to really be that exceptional recruiter that you're looking for typically.
Yeah, I think so. My recruiters are always bringing new things to me, right? New ways of doing things, new tools that they want to check out or try, right? And I love that curiosity. I think curiosity is super important for a good recruiter, right? The biggest probably tool in the recruiter's toolbox is the question why. Like if you do nothing else well, if you can ask that question at the right time, right, then you're halfway there, maybe a third of the way there to being a great recruiter. But so I love that curiosity and I think there's so many things that you need to be a good recruiter, right? So that curiosity and the tenacity is so important, right? And a service ethos, right? It's having that great candidate experience, right? It's a tight market all over the place right now. There's very, very few roles that we can just post an ad for and hire, like one. In our whole company, so everything else we have to go hunt. And so it's just, those candidates are now like gold. It's so important to take such good care of them. And I think having that service ethos, right? So, people always talk about loving to hire people from team sports, which I do get, and I love that too. But I love it when I see, somebody who was a bartender back in the day or a waiter or something, because they have that mentality, especially if they're proud enough of it to keep it on their resume after all this time, right? Like it just shows that they kind of are proud of that service mentality, right?
And that's the kind of craftsmanship that you need to have to be able to recognize when you're looking at a candidate that's coming through. What is this story that they're telling me, and more specifically, what elements maybe make them unique? Yeah,
and it's interesting that you use the word story, right? Because I think storytelling is another huge element of recruiting, right? Of good recruiting. And I think that it starts when I'm looking for a recruiter, right? How are they telling their own story on LinkedIn, on their resume, right? It's important, people who, first of all, who don't have the attention to detail or want to take the time, right? That's already not a great sign. But it can be a really positive differentiator. If you tell a great story on your profile and you make me interested in speaking to you, right? That's a decent sign that you're going to be a pretty good recruiter, right?
Oh, that's great.